Welcome to the LCGC and Spectroscopy Theater, presented live from Orlando at PittCon 2010. Today's educational sessions are brought to you by Spec CertiPrep. Spec CertiPrep provides superior certified reference materials for analytical spectroscopy and chromatography, as well as a wide range of sample preparation equipment. Stay up to date with all their new products, application techniques, and trade show information. Visit them on the web at www.spexcsp.com.
Hello, and welcome to the LCGC PittCon Podcast Theatre, live from Orlando. I'm Peter Houston, Editorial Director of LCGC in Europe, and today I'm joined by Len Sadisky, R&D Manager for Gas Separations at Sapelco Sigma Aldrich. Hi, Len, how are you?
Good morning, thank you.
Len today will be speaking about the use of ionic liquids in MS applications. Len, the first question I have for you is, what are ionic liquids?
All right, ionic liquids, they've actually been around quite a long time. The first work was published back in 1914 by Walden, but basically they're a mixture of ions, a cation and an anion, an organic or at least one organic function. And what we've been doing in conjunction with the group at the University of Texas at Arlington have been developing these for a number of other applications. Some of the fundamental work, they were done by organic chemists, looking them to aid in reactions because ionic liquids, a number of their properties being extremely non-volatile, unique selectivities. So we've taken it a step further in our work with Dan Armstrong and his group to develop them in terms of making them GC stationary phases, looking at them for use as multi-matrices, especially liquid multi-matrices, and then finally some of the work as an ion pairing reagent to do anions in the positive mode with mass spec.
Okay. And what are the benefits of ionic liquids, capillary columns for GCMS applications?
All right, if we can have the first slide up there. When we look again at what we call room temperature ionic liquids, there are a number of different applications that these materials have been used in. Again, they've been used as novel solvents in organic synthesis and liquid-liquid extraction. Again, mobile phase additives in HPLC, run buffer additives in capillary electrophoresis, and again, the focus of my three areas as an additive for ESI, mass spec analysis of anions. They've been used as matrices for matrix-assisted laser desorption, MALDI, mass spec, and stationary phases in gas chromatography, and then finally as sensors. But again, getting back to the work as far as stationary phases in gas liquid chromatography, we've been fairly stagnant in terms of developing new, unique selectivities in GC stationary phases for a number of years. So we think that the ionic liquids will offer some very unique selectivities because of the multiple solvation parameters and uniqueness of these materials relative to standard GC stationary phases. Some of the first work was done back in the early 80s by Colin Poole's group out of Wayne State University, where they were using quaternary ammonium salts as stationary phases. But these materials had a very limited working range, and they were primarily monocationic ionic liquid phases. So what the group at University of Texas Arlington did, they basically have developed geminal dicationic ionic liquids, and also we've worked with some trigonal and also with tetra ionic liquids. So there's some very unique selectivities. And if I can have the next slide, this shows you the very first one that we've commercialized in terms of being a geminal dicationic liquid. So you can see there are four primary places on this ionic liquid that we can change the selectivity of the phase. First of all, in this particular case, I'm showing the imidazolium cation. We could have many different cations, imidazolium, phosphonium, pyrrolidinium, just to name a few. So that's one thing that we can change. We can also change the functional group on the cation. In this case, I show the vinyl moiety, but we've put butyl on there, we've put phenyl, we've put larger groups, bulkier groups, again, to change the overall selectivity of the cation portion of the ionic liquid. And then finally, the spacer. I show an alkyl spacer, a C9 alkane. We can change the length of that spacer. Again, that has different effects on the functionality. We can also use different types of spacers. We can use a polyethylene glycol, we can use a polysiloxane, and these all give us a plethora of different selectivities that we can have from the ionic liquid stationary phases. And then the other key part of this, of course, is the anion. In GC, we're limited in theory to just a couple of anions that we want to use. We try to use this particular one, the bis trisulfurylmethyl sulfonyl imidate, That anion or also triflate are the two most widely used. Things like hexafluorophosphate's been used. We've also looked at halogens, but halogens tend to be detrimental to the performance of the ionic liquid because they depolymerize or attack the imidazolium group. So our focus has been more on the triflate and the NTF2 type anion. But some of the benefits of these are shown up in the next slide in terms of mass spec techniques. In reality, we offer very unique selectivities with the ionic liquids, again, different from normal GC stationary phases. But what we're showing here are a comparison of the GCMS bleed. Now, these are the total ion chromatograms that we've run on 3 different phases, 2 of them being the ionic liquid phases. And the red curve that you see is what we call SLB-IL59. What that designates by that number, it's a polarity in the mid-range of the overall polarity scale for GC phases, but it's very similar to a polyethylene glycol phase, your standard carbowax phases. And people that do this are very familiar with the temperature limitations of carbowax phases, along with the background that you see on a GCMS application. So what we've done is we've developed a number of different phases, and I'm just showing 2 here, the SLB-IL59. Again, it has a PEG-type polarity, but we have a maximum temperature of 300 degrees C. Most polyethylene glycol phases, like the wax example I show here, only has a maximum temperature of 250 degrees. And then I also show a higher, more polar ionic liquid phase that has a max temperature of about 270. And what we're doing here is we ran these chromatograms using Chrysene as a standard at 5 nanograms on column. And you can see the sharpness of the peak, a very good signal-to-noise ratio, even going to 300 degrees on the ionic liquid phase relative to the broad peak on the wax column at 250. And then when we take this a little further and look at the actual spectrum, we get a lot of interferences from the polyethylene glycol phase in trying to determine, is this truly Chrysene? Whereas with the ionic liquid phases, our masses are much lower. We don't see that interference. So we get much better spectral identification of Chrysene in this example and many other examples where we've looked at it. The other advantage with the ionic liquid phases is that we have limited, we don't see your typical bleed that you see with a polysiloxane phase, 207, 281 ions that are very characteristic of polysiloxane degradation. We see much smaller fragments with the ionic liquids, so we're much cleaner in our spectra. So that basically deals with what we see some of the benefits of GCMS with ionic liquid phases.
Great. Can you describe some of the examples using ionic liquids in MALDI matrices?
Yeah, there's been some unique stuff on the next slide. This is some stuff looking at solid MALDI matrices versus the work that Dan Armstrong's group has done with the various ionic liquid phases. And what we're doing here is we're looking at a broad range of different proteins, 1,000 Daltons for bradykinin up to urease. And what we have in the first two chromatograms or spectra are the standard solid MALDI matrices. So we've got the cinnamic acid as the first one, and then cinnamic acid and SAA is another type of solid MALDI matrix. What Dan has done, he's actually taken, and the group at the University of Texas has taken and made ionic liquids. For example, the one that's shown in the third column is isopropyl methyl terbutylamine CHCA. So it's a liquid MALDI matrix. So what you have as a result of this is much more, you don't have to search for hot spots because it's more homogeneous. Your material is all dissolved throughout the entire MALDI matrix, so wherever you shoot the laser, you'll be able to get a hot spot and get signal to the mass spec. And that's what's shown in the last two columns, where you can get the much cleaner signal to noise, much better identification of the various fragments from these various molecular weight proteins. So if we go to the next slide, another really unique example in the use of the ionic liquids for MALDI matrices is looking at biodegradable polymers. You really can't get a true molecular weight range of the biodegradable polymers, using any other technique, because they tend to start degrading right away. By using this particular ionic liquid, which is diisopropyl ethyl ammonium CHCA, again, the cinnamic acid, you can see the differences in the curve, and you're getting a true molecular weight distribution in this MALDI application using the ionic liquid as your matrix. So these are some of the unique advantages that we see with using, the ionic liquids for a liquid MALDI matrix.
Can you talk a little bit, we've run out of time, but can you talk a little bit about ionic liquids for anion analysis?
Yes, that's the next two slides. again, what we've done with ionic liquids, we've taken the dicationic ionic liquid with a 2+ charge, and in this particular example, we'll look at perchlorate. And what we do in the gas phase association, basically we run the LC, we run it through the column, and then you add in your dicationic liquid and you form an ion pair reagent. And then the coupling of the dicationic ionic liquid with the ion, you form a 1+ charge, in this case using the dicat. So you're able to look in the positive ion mode using the ionic liquid in this ion pair coupling, and then you're much greater sensitivity in doing this with the in our mass spec analysis. And again, shown on the next slide, a number of the actual ionic liquids were using the ionic liquids where we've looked at all these anions, both inorganic and organic, and they've essentially set world records in terms of how low the sensitivity is. You're looking at PPT levels of these various ionic liquids quantitatively, and that's even without going in and optimizing the overall performance of the system. So first shot, let's see what we can do, and they've gone to PPT levels of various inorganic and organic ionic liquids.
Great.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, you've been listening and watching the 2010 LCGC Pittcon Podcast Theatre. For more podcasts and articles from LCGC, please log on to our homepage at www.chromatographyonline.com. Thank you.
The LCGC and Spectroscopy Theater, presented live from Orlando at Pittcon 2010. Welcome to the LCGC and Spectroscopy Theater, presented live from Orlando at Pittcon 2010. Today's educational sessions are brought to you by Spec CertaPrep. Spec CertaPrep provides superior certified reference materials for analytical spectroscopy and chromatography, as well as a wide range of sample preparation equipment. Stay up to date with all their new products, application techniques, and trade show information. Visit them on the web at www.spexcsp.com.
I'm Dave Walsh, Editor-in-Chief of LCGC North America and Spectroscopy, and I'm joined today by Annette Wilson, President of Pittcon 2010. Thanks for being here, Annette.
Thanks for having me.
She'll be discussing this year's conference and the conference industry in general, and I guess we'll just go to our first question. What steps has Pittcon taken to ensure survival during these difficult economic times?
Well, we've sort of reinvented the look and feel of Pittcon. You have to change with the changing times. And so, of course, we've tried to implement some of the newer technologies that are available to meetings today. You may notice around the exhibit hall, there's a lot of video monitors, and we're utilizing a lot of product videos from our exhibitors to scroll across these monitors. Also, we've implemented some digital signage into the lobby areas. So we're trying to update the show, bring in some more technology, and just give the show more of a high-tech look and feel.
Okay. And would you say face-to-face meetings like this are still thriving?
Oh, absolutely. There's a time and a place for the webinars, but you can't beat a face-to-face meeting where you can actually get a first-hand look at your equipment. You actually come on site, kick the tires, so to speak, and get a really good look at what you're purchasing. And even there's times when you can bring a sample and possibly get that run on that piece of equipment that you're interested in purchasing. Also, you see live demonstrations. You can interact directly with salespeople and you might come up with some questions that you wouldn't normally think of after you've seen the instrument in person. Also, you have the opportunity to talk and ask questions to the technical personnel and not just salesperson. And also with networking, you get to see face-to-face with colleagues from around the world, it's just more of a personal aspect. And again, you may come up with questions that you wouldn't normally have asked if on the telephone or live via internet. And also you can take advantage of a wide range of activities that you can't on the internet. You have live technical sessions, you can take short courses, participate in networking sessions, mixers, and things like that you can't really do online.
Okay. And Pittcon typically rotates cities. Chicago and New Orleans have been used in the past. What do you think of Orlando as a site?
Okay, well, on the next slide, I talk a little bit about what Orlando has to offer these days. The last time we were in Orlando was Pittcon 2006, and as you can see, Orlando, the city itself, has changed a lot. There's a lot more restaurants that are right around the convention center area. Also, there's a lot of new scientific research going on in Orlando. There's the medical city that's being built out at Lake Nona, where there's medical research centers going up. There's pharmaceutical research going on. The new 600-acre medical city has gone up very rapidly. There's the Sanford Burnham Research Institute, which is actually functioning now, and they expect to bring in a lot more scientists from around the world, so it'll be an international research center. The projected end result is a new, vibrant Central Florida research center employing more than 30,000 people and having an $8 billion economic impact on Florida. Also, the universities are building new research sites. The University of Central Florida's new College of Medicine, which is part of the Burnett Medical Science Building, are almost nearing completion. And on the next slide, there's the MD Anderson Cancer Center, which will operate on the 5th floor of the Burnett building until it builds its own facility nearby. A new children's hospital is now under construction, as well as the Veterans Affairs Medical Center. And over $500 million is going into this new medical center, and it's expected to be finished by 2012 when we next come back to Orlando for Pittcon 2012. Also, the University of Florida Academic and Research Center is planned close to the Sanford Burnham building. There's more than $1.5 billion in biomedical-related construction going underway as we speak. That's being funded by the Florida state. In addition, we have Scripps that's located in Jupiter, Florida, which was the first Southern California research center to open. And it was on its own, and they still employ a lot of scientists, whereas now in Orlando, you have all of these research centers going up, so the impact is even going to be greater.
All right. Well, I think that's about all we have time for, but thanks for being with us today.
Great.
And you've been watching and listening to the 2010 LCGC Spectroscopy Pittcon Podcast Theater, live from Orlando, Florida. For additional podcasts, webcasts, and articles, please visit our homepage at www.chromatographyonline.com or www.spectroscopyonline.com. Thanks.
The LCGC and Spectroscopy Theater, presented live from Orlando at Pittcon 2010.